Hello out there in internet land. Welcome to another exciting edition of This Week in iPad. It's thrilling. It's exciting. I am your host, Lon Harris. Joining me, as always, resident iPad expert, Jacob Birch.
More thrilling than Prince of Persia.
What could be? What could be more thrilling than Jake Gyllenhaal pretending to be from Persia? Really exciting show today. We got a couple little quick notes for the beginning. I do want to remind everybody that we have a ton of new shows on this weekend, so if you're just watching this show on iTunes because you just love me so much and you can't get enough, and you're wondering, is there any other great content coming out of This Week in Studios? There is. Let me tell you about some of it. This coming Sunday, we are debuting, it's our first ever Sunday block of entertainment shows. We're really excited. It's going to start with the Kevin Pollak Chat Show, or Kevin Pollak's Chat Show, rather. That's at 3 p.m. Pacific time. It goes till about 5-ish or so. And then at 6, we've got This Week in Comedy, starring Ed Krasnick. We had the first episode last week. He had Paul Provenza and Rick Overton on. It was amazing. He's got another great episode coming up this week. Tons of guests. And then after that, we're going to have This Week in Movies, which is going to start at 8 p.m. and go until 9. Jennifer Elise Cox, who was Jan Brady in the Brady Bunch movies, is going to be the guest on there. I will be on that show along with Farrell Roth and Roger Actinch. It's going to be the very first episode, so definitely tune into that. Really excited about it. It's our first collection of non-techie sort of shows. It's a new sort of direction for us and the company, and we're pretty stoked about it.
Kevin's show this week?
Kevin's show, actually, I'm glad you asked. Megawatt guest this week, Craig Ferguson, star of his own late night show, easily one of the top 5 guests in Kevin Pollak show history. So that's really exciting. And yeah, definitely tune in for that. That's at 3 p.m. Pacific time live, and then you can catch it anytime thereafter on thisweekend.com. One other note here at the top, we're going to be joined later in the show by Matthew Paulson. He edits iPad Weekly. It's iPadweek.ly for those of you who want to go visit it. He is our new blogger for This Week in iPad. He's our official blogger, and he's going to check in with us. We may have him check in on future shows. We'll see. Sure. Knowledgeable, runs a whole news blog about This Weekend, or runs a blog about iPad, not about us. So welcome to Matthew. We'll bring him in later in the show. I want to jump in right away because we've got our own high wattage guest today in our own iPad way. It's Scott Raymond. He is the CTO and co-founder of Gowalla, one of the big geolocation. Geolocation is so hot right now. I feel silly saying that. It's like Zoolander, like, it's so hot right now. But it really is. I mean, everywhere you go, like Dennis Crowley was on the cover of Wired. There's all these stories about Foursquare, Gowalla, Looped. I mean, who's gonna win? Facebook's getting into it. So really excited. Thank you, Scott, so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Delighted to have you here. So I do want to take a look. Let's just check out the Gowalla app. I have it up here on my iPad. So this is the activity screen. Let's take a look at the iPad. It's right here. There it is. So you can see this is Mahalo HQ right now. Mike Bracco, my coworker, obsessive about checking in. He is checked in here right now along with somebody else. John W. checked in at Mahalo HQ.
Dr. Watson.
Oh, that's right. John Watson. Okay, so this is a basic look around. Here's like the recent activity in the area. Here is where you can look up spots. Like I will check into Mahalo right now. I clicked on it, right? Yeah, there we go. Check in. So, this stuff is all like what you would see sort of on the iPhone app or anywhere else you were using Gowalla. Here is, they just added the trips feature. We'll definitely have to talk about this a little bit. You can see these sort of planned out trips that people have suggested. Here's the Frank Lloyd Wright tour, and then you actually get sort of walked through all the different locations. You could check in the whole way and log what you're doing there. And then finally, your passport right here. So, Scott, tell us a little bit about the development of the Gowalla app. I mean, how long did this take you guys to create? And what were some of the challenges versus you already had a pretty well-established iPhone app? What were some of the unique challenges of porting it over to the iPad?
Well, yeah, to start off with, as you mentioned, we had an iPhone app for a while now. And so we sort of, iPad was announced, and we decided to basically jump right into it as quick as we could. We kind of weighed the options of, well, maybe we should take, a month and go through a, big, long design phase and wait till we get a hold of the hardware so that we can try it out ourselves before we build it. But then we thought, what the hell? Let's just see if we can get something out there as quick as possible. So we took the iPhone version that we had and started with kind of a direct port to iPad, but then kind of as you go, there's just UI things that just don't work as well on this device, and some kind of new opportunities that work much better on a big screen. So we iterated really quickly, and were able to submit it probably after 3 weeks or so of working on it.
Wow, 3 weeks from nothing to an app is sort of amazing. I noticed that the app seems to downplay a little bit the collection of items, which is really prevalent in the iPhone version. I mean, everywhere you go, you're checking in, you're getting these items. You can still find them. I mean, if you go here, you can see my passport is up, and then you can go. If you show try to show the bottom here, you can go to these like tabs at the bottom. I can see my items here and actually navigate them pretty easily. I can also see what's vaulted, which was always a big thing with the iPhone app. It was hard to see what was in your vault. But so other than I feel like on the iPad the items are less. Was that intentional to move away from the sort of items? And is there what's the plan to move forward with the items to make it is it going to be more of like a full-fledged game?
Right. Yeah, well, there are some things that I think we just discovered are just more natural with this kind of device form factor, right? So, I mean, part of the thing is that because we were under such a kind of tight schedule that we knew we wanted to ship something really fast, the first version did cut out some features. Like we didn't have trips, for instance, in the first version of iPad. And I don't think that there was even items anywhere in the first version of the iPad Gowalla version. But then in subsequent releases, we do have items. And like you mentioned, I think in some ways items are richer now on iPad than they are on the phones, like the fact that you can view your vault. So I don't think that, I mean, there's certainly not any strategy to move away from items or to downplay items. It was just a matter of we wanted to focus on the most core experience first, and the most, kind of the thing that comes most natural to the device form factor, which I think is the map. Like I love the kind of activity view or the activity tab on iPad, and the fact that you can zoom out and see the whole world and pan around and see where friends are. So that's where we wanted to put most of the effort.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the map is, as you can see, much more prevalent here, and you can pull out and I can sort of get the entire LA view, and you can see all of my sort of connections that have checked in. And it's actually kind of handy for discovering. We did a show a few weeks ago about like finding places in your neighborhood, the best apps for sort of like restaurant finders or bar finders. And actually, though that's not sort of the primary use case of Gowalla, I don't think of it as, it's actually pretty handy for that. You can see where people have checked in around you and, discover places that you may not have known about. 24-hour fitness, I certainly didn't know about that one. But, so it actually can be used that way, and the map is a cool thing. I'm just curious as to sort of generally, where do you see sort of Gowalla going in terms of the iPad? I mean, is it going to primarily be you go to places, you check in, you get the items, you drop the items, and it's sort of this check-in mixed with game kind of philosophy? Or is it going to become more like a find places in your neighborhood maybe you didn't know about, meet up style with your friends, or sort of all of the above?
Definitely all of the above, but I do think that the most interesting use case for me, at least as far as forward as I can see, is that kind of exploration thing, right? Like just kind of panning the map around and using search, which is another great feature that came out more recently in iPad, that you can just search for some spot, and it doesn't matter necessarily if it's nearby, but also, discovery basically. And it's an even better interface, I think, than the web or the phones for browsing pictures, for instance. Like I love like scanning across Manhattan, finding an interesting spot, and then pulling up the pictures and flicking through them.
Yeah, the pictures thing definitely seems sort of native in a way to the iPad. Here's one I took at a place called Mexico City that's in my neighborhood, one of my favorite little Mexican places. And it definitely images, I mean, everything because of the iPad. It's so graphical, so rich, so colorful.
Totally.
Really is a great experience on the iPad.
I actually see a lot more. I mean, I hope that those features get even more rich, just being able to flick through hundreds of photos, favoriting them, commenting on them, stuff like that.
Yeah, it's almost like Flickr plus check-ins, kind of, it might develop into. So in terms of the trips, which is one of the, obviously, like the big features that you guys have added since the app came out, how many trips have people built, and what do you have any plans for like incentivizing people to keep building trips? Because it is a great experience when there's all these trips on there, if there's one in your area, to jump in and do from a user's perspective. But how do you get people on the other side building and putting in the effort to make these trips?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I don't know any numbers off the top of my head about how many trips have been created recently, but I do think that there's definitely something to that idea of incentivizing people. And, as you know, we have this concept of pins in the app. And so that's kind of our system for rewarding people for doing interesting stuff and creating content that's valuable to the community. So I can imagine, that maybe we should create pins to say I've created 10 trips or 100 people have completed the trip that I created.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of these sort of richer things that I can see grabbing people about the app is, especially if you're in an area you don't know. It's like there's like a ghost haunted house trip that's actually really interesting. I think it's in Charleston, so I haven't had an opportunity to be there. But if you ever went there, it'd be a great way to sort of just do local discovery. And that seems to be like kind of threading the needle of geolocation to me in a way, is that we've kind of perfected the check-in, people have fun checking in, see where your friends are around there, and everybody meets up. And South by Southwest, obviously, where a lot of these sort of launched, makes that sort of very intuitive, where's everybody hanging out. But it seems like, matching it up to real-world experiences. So I can use the app to get a discount where I'm going, or I can use the app to, have some sort of reward in the real world. It seems like a lot of these apps are kind of getting there, but nobody's quite nailed that yet. Is that something you guys are really active in thinking about?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, we spend at least, probably almost every day over lunch. We're all just kind of brainstorming about how can we make this product, more interesting and deeper and just more fun.
Yeah, definitely. Any sneak preview you can give us about where you guys are headed with the app? What features that are coming? Things you're really working on closely? I love having scoops on the show if possible.
Gosh, I don't have anything very specific right now, but I think that in general you can expect to see this stuff we were talking about of just making more kind of connections to different pieces of content within the app. So my goal, especially with the iPad version, is that people could just get engrossed and lose, an hour at a time because it's so fun to kind of jump from spot to user to trip to, favorites and browsing through photos and then discovering new, spots to hang out at.
Yeah. More generally, in terms of geolocation with the iPad, because with the phone, geolocation is extremely intuitive. It's in my pocket. Wherever I go, I just whip it out. I sort of plug in where I am. What are you seeing as developing in terms of geolocation with the iPad, which maybe people are bringing with them when they go to Starbucks, but maybe not when they're running errands, or I bring it to work, but I don't know if everybody's bringing it to work. So what do you think is going to be the value add for having geolocation on the iPad as opposed to some other device that would be, more portable?
Well, I mean, when I first got my iPad, or before I got my iPad, I had the same assumption that you were just kind of describing, that, well, I'm not going to have it always with me. But maybe this speaks to my geekiness too, but I find that I am actually carrying it with me all over the place, business meetings that I go to, and even the park, and of course, coffee shops and stuff like that. So I've actually been surprised at how often I reach for my iPad first before I pull out my phone.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely do bring it with me to places I know I'm going to be for more than like a half hour, 45 minutes. But is there something unique about the iPad, though, in terms of geolocation? I mean, I know that you guys are sort of the first big ones to move there. Some of the other big geolocation services don't yet have a native iPad app, which I guess they're just sort of dragging their heels on generally. But, what are you guys thinking is sort of the angle? Why so eager to get on there and be the first and sort of stake your claim on the iPad?
Well, a lot of it's just that we think it's awesome, and we wanted a chance to play around with the new technology. And I mean, honestly, I do believe that iPad in general represents like a significant fundamental change to how we're going to be using computers in the next decade, So I think we were all here just eager to get our feet wet and explore, what the new form factor and the new input kind of methods would look like when we applied it to our product. And actually, we've learned a lot of lessons, I think, from the iPad that we're applying back right now toward our web design in general. So
really? Can you unpack that a little? That's kind of interesting.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's, maybe it's not. It's still kind of abstract, but for instance, on the web, there's a lot of people rely on a hover state, so that you move your mouse pointer around to reveal some kind of interaction. And of course, you can't do that on iPad, right? You're either touching it or not. There's no kind of input method for hover, which is interesting. And I think that's, filtering it, that kind of mode of interaction is filtering back to the web. And same thing with like flicking. I think eventually on the web, we'll see a lot more kind of quasi-tactile ways of interacting with websites that are reminiscent of how you would do it on iPad or iPhone.
Yeah, the flicking thing is interesting because we're actually talking about RSS readers later in the show, and the one that I'm using, Reader, it's all based on this kind of like strong flick and then a small, even the strength with which you flick determines different ways that you're sort of using the app. So it's really interesting, and I do think that people are going to get used to that and then want that experience everywhere instead of the like hit this little button and scroll or whatever.
I find myself wanting reader-style interactions on the desktop even, and on the web. So I expect that gradually those things will trickle down.
Yeah, it definitely seems like that's coming. So my last question would be, and I'll see if Jacob has anything to jump in on, but obviously, like geolocation, as I was saying in the intro, it's incredibly hot at the moment. Tons of stuff going on. Yelp just introduced its sort of Yelp royalty, you're the Duke of this area or whatever features. How do you see Gowalla just in general fitting in? Like, what is your guys' angle? What sets Gowalla apart that you think is going to make it sort of stand out from the massive crowd of other apps trying to do similar sort of stuff?
Yeah, well, sure. I think there's a few things that we really value that we try and instill in the product. One is a really strong sense of visual design, and I think this shines through very clearly in the iPad version of the product. So my kind of goal is that, how like if you're standing on a street corner or something in Manhattan, like you look down the street and you can just tell where you are just based on like the architecture, So my dream, that is that in the future, when you're looking at kind of a list of spots on the iPad, just based on the iconography and things like that, like it would be, even if you didn't read the text, it would be unmistakable where you are, because there's just such a sense of place and visuals. So that's really important, I think, is that we want a sense of place with the artwork as opposed to just text. And I think you can see that pretty clearly. But then beyond that, I would say we're just really interested in the kind of social connections that are possible. So I want to see people commenting on everyone's check-ins and uploading photos everywhere they go, and really establishing this rich passport that's much deeper, actually, than a regular passport ever was.
Interesting. Yeah, so it's sort of like a lot of the others are focused on making it that very immediate, like you go to Starbucks and then you get a free cup of coffee or anything. And this one is more like bringing the social network with you wherever you're going.
Of course, all those features, like getting special deals at places you go, are totally interesting, and we're experimenting with that stuff too. Mm-hmm. But yeah, when you talk about differentiators, I think we're really interested in just the kind of the human level aspects of what's interesting.
Awesome. I know you got to run. Thank you so much for joining us, Scott. We really appreciate having you here, and great work on the app. We really like it.
Thanks
a
my
lot.
Pleasure.
So I should disclose now that the interview part is over that Jason Calacanis, who is a co-founder of This Week In and our network, he is an investor in Gowalla. I promise you all that had no bearing on our decision to have Scott on the show or my decision to say nice things about Gowalla. We don't do things like that here. I've had discussions on the show about companies Jason's invested in where we have not been overwhelmingly positive, but I did want to throw that out there here at the end. I know people in the chat room were talking about it. Yes, there is a professional connection between Jason, who is one of the sort of higher-ups at This Weekend, and Gowalla. So just to get that out there, total honesty and transparency in all things This Weekend, and thank you all for that. So I guess we'll do some news, and we'll get Matthew Paulson, our new blogger, on the line as soon as they can pull him up on Skype. Lots of big news to talk about this week, of course. I should also mention one other sort of show note generally. I am looking for a replacement. This is as good a time as any to make the announcement. I love the iPad. I love being on the show. I love all you wonderful people.
You love me.
I love you, Jacob, very deeply, as you know. I don't think it's quite time for us to move in together yet, but I need a little time, but soon. So it is nothing personal about you, Mr. Birch, or our audience, or Apple's wonderful device. I am just massively, massively overwhelmed trying to get a lot of shows together for our network. We are iterating very quickly. And frankly, I feel like we could get somebody in here who is as passionate as I am about Apple products and the iPad, somebody who is even more of a massive, over-the-top Apple fan than myself. So if you think this sounds like you don't even have to be in LA. We can Skype people in. Let me know, lon@thisweekend.com. I will not be leaving immediately in a week, but we're gonna start the search. So I want to hear from you if you think you would be completely awesome at this and that you could do my job, although who could, really? Let's be honest. You could do 80% of my job. That sounds fair. So definitely let me know. I figured I will mention this again at the end of the show, but just want to throw it out there. Just want to mention it. And then now we have our blogger in charge, Matthew Paulson. Thank you for joining us, Matthew.
Thank you.
Your site is iPadweek.ly, iPad Weekly, for people who want to mention it. We'll try to get that up on screen or get that into the chat room at least, and we'll obviously have it on the blog so you guys can check it out. Check out his site. Great site, by the way. I mean, that was one of the big things that sort of led us to want to bring you on board was we looked at the site. It's really well designed. It's tons of info, tons of updates every day. Is that your primary work to be the managing editor of iPad Weekly?
No, I actually have a full-time job. I'm a web developer. I do ASP.NET stuff, and I find time to do the iPad stuff in between.
Wow, so that is impressive. And you even have a staff. I mean, it's a real blog. It's not like some guy in his basement. I mean, It might be. It looks like you're in a basement right now, but it's not just one guy in his basement. It's many people in many basements spread out all over the country.
Yep.
Just I want to just to chat with Matt a little bit, get a little sense of what he's all about. Why do you think, this is my sort of general question to all the iPad guests, why do you think the iPad is such a phenomenon? We all know it's useful, it's fun, but what do you think it is that's so sort of captured everybody's imagination, has everybody so excited about it?
Sure. I think there's a few good reasons. I think one, it's an Apple device. Steve Jobs could, announce an Apple toothbrush and it'd sell 5 million of them in the first year. But I think the device does, stand on its own merit as well. I think some of the user interface, improvements, the fact that there's no, pointer, there's no mouse, there's touch. I think that's, a big factor. And I think that the fact that it doesn't really try to mold you into a particular use case, say this is a web device, an email device, say a medical applications device, and, a content device, and you can really use it for whatever you want. So it allows it to fill a lot of different holes.
That's interesting. That there may be some truth to that. It feels like a lot of other devices are kind of pigeonholing you. Like the BlackBerry is for your work, and the iPhone is for like fun and apps and everything. And so it's so malleable. I mean, it's got so many different uses, and I've really been proven wrong. My case in the original few episodes was like, it's a toy, it's for fun. And now every week I'm sort of forced to use it for productivity cases or business cases on the show, and I've really discovered it's a lot more. There's a lot more depth to it than I had originally thought, and there's a lot more sort of stuff that you can do with it. What are your favorite kinds of apps? I mean, what would you say is the category of apps or the kind of use for the iPad that most interests you?
Well, let me start by saying I think the best designed app is probably WebMD. I don't use it on a daily basis, but they have done, you can't see that, but they've done just such a good job with the user interface and really have made good use of kind of some of the the design elements of the iPad, and I think, they just did a really solid job on that. In terms of my use case, I use it primarily for content consumption. So I do things like Netflix, ABC's Player. I like the App Advice application. It's another good kind of iPod blog that is out there. They've got a nice iPad app. USA Today, and I also use Safari a lot because I like it as a web surfing device.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably, if you had to ask me, like, the one thing I use the iPad for most, it's Safari. I mean, I'm using it mostly to browse the web. Although Netflix, I have to say, I prefer the Netflix experience on the iPad to my iMac at home, which is surprising to me. I didn't think, I thought, it'd be good if I'm in an airport and I've got Wi-Fi and I want to stream Netflix. But actually just sitting on my couch with the iPad and Netflix is, I think, a pretty amazing experience. So where do you see, Matthew, the iPad going from here? I mean, what is like the killer feature Apple needs to add when iPad 2 inevitably hits? And what do you think would convince sort of the naysayers? Because I feel like there's still people, I'll show them my iPad, and they're like, oh, I don't need that. What do you think would be like the killer thing Apple could add to like win everybody over and another 5 million people want to go buy one?
Sure. I don't know if there's one killer feature that Apple needs to do. I would say there's probably maybe 2 or 3 incremental features that would really, expand the iPad's use to a lot more people. I'd say one is, multitasking. Once they get iOS 4 on there in, say, September or whenever they decide to announce it, that'll be probably, one of the big things. And, I think Apple really needs to do something with the file system. Moving files on the iPad and off the iPad is, kind of a pain, and I think they could do something better there. And, I'd say maybe, finally that Apple needs to do something so that you can, when you buy an iPad, you don't have to hook it up to a computer. You just press the button and it's on. It needs to be a way so that can be somebody's primary computer. And right now, you have to connect it to iTunes and, a computer. And, what if you don't have a computer? Then you can't buy one, really.
Yeah, that actually, I think we talked about this on the very first episode of This Week in iPad I was on, which was like episode number 3. It was only a couple weeks after it came out, and that had occurred to me right away. I was shocked when I opened the box and I turned it on for the first time and it told me, hook me up into your iTunes. It's like, really? I thought this was a computer. Like, what other? It's like you buy an iMac and it's like, hook me up into another iMac. It's like, I shouldn't have to have like a barrier to entry like that. Like, I not only have to have a computer, I have to have iTunes set up and installed on that computer. And it just seems it really seems unnecessary to me in that way. Like, I still don't, maybe Jacob, you could shed some light on this. Like, why are they doing that? Like, why do they need you to do that? What is the motive for Apple there?
I don't know.
I can't even figure it out.
What leaps to mind is making sure it's the most up-to-date firmware and there isn't an emergency. That would be the spin, I suppose, they would throw out. But outside of that, I got nothing. I tried looking around and people made guesses, but none of them really sort of made sense to me.
It's just like, are they tagging? Is that like they can identify that you have just one, or it's your primary, or something like
making
you're
sure
not
that they're getting numbers that boom, this is registered, and then ensuring that there's no emergency firmware for security reasons they have to throw in there before you even launch it up.
Yeah, I see. Jay Praz, one of the This Week in iPad superfans, he's here every week. I see he's saying like it's control, and I get the critique that Jobs is just a control freak and wants to control everything. And we have some news stories that are about that very issue. But I don't even get why he would need to control it. Like,
where's the control?
Yeah, usually like you get like, oh, he doesn't want Flash on there because he wants people to buy games. That I get. That's a control thing that's like has a direct profit, windfall for Apple. But I don't get why he needs to control like. You can't start up this computer without having iTunes on another computer.
The one argument with control would be that it's ensuring that you have access to a computer for which to buy apps and later, but you can buy apps.
You can buy apps right here.
So,
and in fact, I do. I never buy apps in the iTunes store on my computer. I always use the iPad itself. So yeah, I don't get that. Which I guess is not a good thing to say on your iPad show. I don't get it. Let's move on. Matt, any insight on that? What's your theory? Why does Jobs make you do that?
Well, actually, I think at the D8 conference, Jobs was asked about that. Why do you need to hook it up to a computer? And he was pretty frank that it's something we need to improve upon. We're not quite there yet, but I think it's maybe something that Apple missed in the initial launch. Everyone at Apple has a computer and won't think it's an issue, but once it gets out into some real-world use cases, maybe Apple, realized, hey, we kind of screwed that up.
Yeah. I should note here as a disclaimer, Jason Calacanis has not invested in Apple, so I'm allowed to say whatever I want. We don't just want to add that in here. So let's do a little news. Let's talk about some non-show related news. And Matt, please jump in if you've got stuff to say.
Okay.
According to the Wall Street Journal, Research in Motion, they make the BlackBerry, of course, is developing a tablet that will work as a companion to your BlackBerry phone. The tablet won't have its own cellular connection. It tethers to the BlackBerry. It will reportedly have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth connectivity, and it also may have an 8.9-inch touchscreen. That's a rumor still. We haven't heard exact specs from RIM. And thus far, their only touchscreen device is the BlackBerry Storm, so it would be a pretty big move ahead for them. According to the same article, they're also working on a touchscreen phone with a slide-out keyboard, and their shares spiked more than 5% on the Canadian Stock Exchange. I didn't even know there was a Canadian Stock Exchange. Their shares spiked 5% on the Canadian Stock Exchange, the TSX, after the announcement. So given the poor history for companion devices overall, I mean, most of the blogs I read immediately brought up the Palm Folio failed project where it was going to be like a tablet that links to your Trio, and it never even came out. Do you think they're going to succeed here where others have failed? And I mean, is this really a tablet, or is this kind of an add-on to your BlackBerry? What do you think, Jacob?
I think it's going to fail. I think the one thing, I mean, we've said it, I think maybe every show, the place you use this most often is on the couch. It's relaxing. Yeah. It's not necessarily just for fun and games, but in a relaxed, pick it up, put it down environment. And RIM, the BlackBerry, is primarily a business and people who are using it are
Right.
get it through their company. And it just, while there are applications there, and I'm sure it will be, not a total failure,
It'll probably come out.
It'll
like the Folio, yeah.
Unlike or the Courier, a bunch of tablets that have come out. I don't know if it'll come out. If it does come out, I'm sure it will succeed within the BlackBerry crowd. But the boom, whether it be Apple's marketing for whatever reason, is because it's a malleable device. You can use it in a lot of different situations. It isn't pigeonholed into sort of the business enterprise sphere.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. What do you think, Matt? You excited about a BlackBerry tablet?
No, I think it's a non-starter for me. I think the BlackBerry OS isn't quite there yet, and they haven't really mastered that touch stuff yet. And I don't think the App Store for BlackBerry is going to be there. I mean, I read an article the other day where it said there's only 7,000 apps available for in BlackBerry's App Store, and only a fraction of those will probably work on this new tablet companion. So I don't think in terms of what you would actually do on the iPad or the BlackBerry tablet that would be useful to many people.
I was that 7,000 figure. I was actually surprised it was that many. My girlfriend has a BlackBerry, and she's constantly hitting the wall in terms of like there's no apps that she wants for her BlackBerry.
6,000 of those are fart apps,
right? or just now the Vuvuzela app. So you wave it in the air and it makes a loud South African inspired buzzing sound. But no, even Twitterberry took forever to come out. You could even just tweet from your BlackBerry, and then she's still, I think, waiting for Foursquare. You had to log into Foursquare every time she wanted to check in. I mean, it's just, they're going to have to really massively uptick their production of, cool apps if they want to make a tablet work, I think.
I like the name Companion, though. It's good.
It's a companion device?
Nintendo Rob is what I think of when I think of Companion.
Yeah, I don't know if the American public is sold on that idea of companion device. I think the idea of carrying around multiple devices is still pretty, we are used to. Like, I have my iPhone, I have my iPad, but I think most people would feel silly leaving the house with that many things. So that's kind of it strikes me as a tough sell for them. So the next story, analyst Katie Mogul, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, of YouGov, she's postulated that sales of the iPad will not be able to keep up their current momentum now that all the dedicated Apple fanboys and fangirls out there have picked up their devices. The quote is, quote, "It's not clear that the general public sees the need for a third computing device. Word of mouth about the iPad is not in the top tier of its category." I'm not sure what she means by that. It's its category tablets, because I don't see how the word of mouth on the iPad is worse than other tablets. There really aren't even other tablets. Mogul's predicting that she's predicting 6.5 million iPads will sell in the first year. Most other analysts have put that between 8 and 12 million. She also pointed out a very weird stat that I actually had to look into. 20% of Americans own an Apple product, and 97% of people who've purchased an iPad were in that 20%. They already owned another Apple product. So the implication clearly is that the Apple has a little sector of the population that it's carved out that are hardcore fans, and they will buy lots and lots of different apps, but everybody else is sort of, I don't know, I'm a PC, Windows 7 was my idea, and get out of my face with everything else. I actually had to look that up because the 20% thing sounded so ludicrous to me. I mean, how could only 20% of Americans have an iPod or something? And then, sure enough, that stat was from early 2007. So it was before the iPhone was even introduced. And so you would think if you were with a think tank and you were making an analyst prediction, you would use more recent numbers about what percentage of Americans. I couldn't find a good stat for what percentage of Americans currently own an Apple product. So if anybody in the chat room has that, please do jump in, because I'd be very curious to know. So what do you guys think? Do you agree with this? Do you think that the sort of we've crested with the iPad now that all the hardcore Appleites have one, or do you think this is just there's tons and tons of new countries and new people all the time that are being sort of introduced, and that it's got a long shelf life and it's going to just keep going up?
I think it'll slow down, but at the same time, it's just forgetting Christmas. I mean, at $500, it's a perfect price point for that one luxury item. There's tons of people where you can't think of an app, or a gift for them, but it's a wife or a kid or something like that. Boom, just give them an iPad. It's easy. They don't have one. Boom, there you go. No, I think she's wrong. So.
Matt, I saw you shaking your head even while I was reporting the story.
Yep. I think Mogul is definitely in the minority of analysts. Let's be honest, YouGov doesn't really have the same credibility as, say, Morgan Stanley, a Citigroup, or a Piper Jaffray. I mean, Morgan Stanley's Katie Huberty says that Apple is going to sell 10 million iPads and the rest of in 2010 and 15 million in 2011. Susquehanna says that Apple will sell 7 million in 2010 and 14 million in 2011. There's 9 more countries that are going to get the iPad this year, and there's the holiday season, and there's so many reasons that it's going to be more than the number that she suggested.
Yeah. Speaking of getting iPads as gifts, I just want to bring this up. I just want to throw this out there. Oprah Winfrey's O Magazine, it's celebrating its 10th anniversary. To celebrate, Oprah stopped by their office and gave everyone, a check for $10,000 and an iPad. Also, leather engraved embossed cases with their initials in them. And I mean, and this is regardless of how long you've worked there. I mean, if you started a month ago, you got an iPad, a leather case, and a check for 10 grand. I don't have a question to go along with this news story. I just know Mark Jeffrey, our CEO, is watching this right now. I just wanted to put that out there. I just wanted to get that in his mind. That's a nice gift. I mean, we were gifted, not gifted. We were given iPads.
I bought mine.
You bought yours?
Yeah.
Oh,
Jason
really?
Calacanis is at the Lakers game, though, so he's not listening.
That's true. Yeah. He's not listening. We can talk about, like, he did. When I was working with Mahalo, I got my iPad. So I shouldn't really talk. But I just want to put that out there. If we hit a year anniversary, check for 10 large wouldn't. I wouldn't say no. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to the next news story. I couldn't believe that is. I mean, I know she's a billionaire and she could afford it, but imagine you're just working someday and Oprah is like, everybody gets an iPad and $10,000.
You get to that.
You. I mean, like, what a day that would be. Okay, so let's move on to actual news. Last week we talked about Goatsy Security, my favorite name for a corporation ever. They're a group that they exposed the security gap, which leaked all these email addresses for iPad 3G owners. Over 100,000 people who own an iPad 3G had their emails sort of exposed via the security breach. Now, one of the group's members, it's 24-year-old Andrew, let's see if I can get this right, Arnheimer. He's been arrested and charged with 4 felony counts of possession of a controlled substance. The Washington Sheriff's Office found cocaine, ecstasy, and LSD in his home in Fayetteville, Arkansas. The Sheriff's Office didn't say whether the arrest was linked to the FBI's investigation of the iPad security breach in which Andrew was involved, but they did say that the FBI had searched his residence last week as part of that investigation. Kind of an odd, like, hints of conspiracy around this. Like, do you think these two incidents are connected? Do you think it's like we know Steve Jobs and Apple notoriously a little vindictive when people try to screw them over. I mean, they were somehow involved in the FBI kicking down the Gizmodo blogger's door and searching his place after he did the write-up about the new iPhone. Like what do you think? Do you think that this was connected in some way, or is it just an unlucky coincidence for this guy who likes cocaine and iPads?
And who doesn't?
Who doesn't?
Maybe, I don't know. It's definitely sort of a mob sense. The second you screw with Jobs, you woke up with a horse's head next to your, or goat's head, goatsy head?
A goatsy head?
Next
That's
to your
awful.
bed. Sorry.
That would be even worse than a horse's head.
But that said, I mean, having a hacker, and I know they said they weren't nefarious in it, but they still released public emails, so they were.
Well, they didn't release them, did they? I mean, they got them themselves, and then they alerted the media that they had done it. And they had said, I mean, I don't know if the veracity of this, but they had said that they were doing it to benefit iPad users. Like, hey, we exposed this for you guys, so now you know that this is out there.
I was under, and I could be wrong. I was under the impression that they exposed the leak, but I could be wrong. That they still put the information out there.
As Jay Prods is pointing out, this is what I had heard, that they sent Ryan Tate from Gawker, they sent him the list, but they didn't publish it publicly, so they're trusting Gawker to keep all that under wraps, because we all know Gawker notoriously tight-lipped with secret information. So what do you think, Matt? Am I right to be conspiratorial in this? You think Jobs was making phone calls and then had this guy set up?
I don't think Jobs had anything to do with it. I think this is all AT&T. AT&T in their press release or their email, their apology email was, weren't very apologetic, and they spent a lot of the time in that note, blaming that, the group of nefarious hackers, and saying it was all their fault and that they had targeted AT&T and just, AT&T took the totally wrong approach in this, I remember, a couple weeks ago, there was that Google security researcher that found a security hole in Windows XP, wrote about it, and, Microsoft didn't cry foul and say, hey, we're going to, prosecute you and do legal action. I mean, AT&T just, screwed this case up, but that guy, Andrew Arnheimer, didn't do much of a better job either. I mean, if you're going to do such, maybe a hack like that, that's such high profile. You got to expect somebody's going to be knocking on your door sometime. And why would you have drugs there? That's just stupid.
Fair enough. I can't say I would not do it. I would not try to get people. And it was VIPs too. I mean, he's really messing with like Bloomberg and I think it was
Diane Sawyer.
Yeah, and Rahm Emanuel. I mean, he's picking some powerful enemies there. Okay, so the last news story I want to talk about. Earlier this year, a company called Throwaway Horse had submitted an app to the App Store called Ulysses Seen. It's a comic by artist Robert Barry, and it adapts the classic James Joyce novel Ulysses, which English major Jacob, I'm sure you've read many times and understand thoroughly. And it was just Bloom Day. So this is perfect.
I haven't downloaded. Have you read it? The app since it's come back on.
I haven't read the app. I tried to read Ulysses.
How do they do the Penelope section on the iPad?
I don't. Maybe they skipped that part. Apple rejected the app originally due to some panels that feature nudity in the comic, and then they asked Throwaway Horse to resubmit when the offending panels were removed. The business manager of Throwaway Horse, Chad Rutkowski, he was skeptical that anyone at iPad or Apple was actually even familiar with Ulysses. He thought, based on the feedback he got, that they thought this was just some random dirty comic that was a little bit like weird and for some reason all set in one day or whatever. Like he didn't get the sense that they knew that this was like actual, literary material. Apple's policy has been that app developers should not be permitted to use nudity in any of their images, even if it's pixelated or covered by fig leaves. The company actually had published a censored version of the app. They had released it and they just like zoomed in and did close-ups on those images so they weren't seeing like, the naughty bits. Apple has now reversed that decision. They're going to release the full Ulysses Scene. I think they have actually already. And the graphic novel adaptation of The Importance of Being Earnest, which had been banned for some reason. Due to
cucumber sandwiches.
Inappropriate witticisms. Apple spokesman Shirley Miller admits that they made a mistake, and she stresses that the developers were contacted soon so it could be corrected. So, what I think, honestly, I know it's good that the app is out. I'm glad that it's available. I could go see it if I want to because I want more freedom with how I use my iPad. But I honestly think this might be worse. Like, if you have a set policy, that's one thing. But now if you have a set policy and you're making exceptions for certain kinds of apps, I think that's actually worse. I think that makes Apple now, they're setting themselves up as like the arbiter of taste and decency. Like, oh, well, Ulysses, that's a great book, so that's okay. But other comics that maybe have like a cartoon penis in it, that's offensive. And it's like, I don't want Apple looking at any comics. I want to read any comic that somebody has released and they want to put on the iPad. I should be able to read that if I want to read that comic, even if it has nothing, even if it's a comic that's just penises. I want to read that. I want to read the penis comic. But seriously, like you get what I'm saying, right? I mean,
I do, but I think people, from what I've said, people constantly want the App Store to be more like a bookstore or a library where things can go in it as long as it passes the Library of Congress. But Apple's treatment of the App Store historically has been much closer to how Sony, Nintendo have treated their publishing rights to release a game.
Right.
Maybe one adult. I don't even think any of them have ever gotten an AO rated game. The PC has a couple, but
certainly not that was officially licensed.
And they definitely see themselves as they don't need to cater to anything even closely. Maybe going past the 17 plus, which I don't know if a cartoon penis counts, but
apparently it does.
But I mean, that's a comparison. John Gruber of Daring Fireball,
yes.
Say that right, has made before, comparing the App Store to a Nintendo console, and that's how I've always viewed it. So it was no surprise to me. I'm like you. I'm sort of surprised they made an exception, and I think they're getting themselves into potentially debate wars, but that's not new. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, if they have a blanket policy, like, if you have this amount of nudity in your app, we will not allow you in the store. That's like what Nintendo does, where it's like it has to fit into these kinds of guidelines. Right. And it's like what the MPAA does. I mean, It's like if you have this, you're a PG-13. I wish they were more like this because it's a little bit random the way they do it. But it's like this many F words, you get this rating, and this many F words, you get this rating. I almost feel like at least then it's standard, and they're not individual people that are making individual judgment calls about every app. I mean, this implies, like, I'm picturing, maybe that's just me, but I'm picturing like 1984, like there's this big office building in Cupertino, and everybody's getting apps on the wall, and they're like taking their red marker out and crossing off the parts they don't like. And I mean, it's very sort of oddly draconian to have a panel that decides well, this is literature, that's okay, this is not. Like, what do you think, Matt? You agree with me? I mean, do you think Apple should be individually reviewing apps and deciding what is appropriate for people to read?
I think this is a sign of the inconsistency of what gets in the App Store and what doesn't. The Sun UK paper, the page 3, the girls, topless. That magazine got in just fine, but this doesn't get in. That just doesn't make sense to me. I'm okay if Apple makes a policy and says, hey, we don't want porn. We don't want porn on this device. It's something that my 3 and 7-year-old nieces use, so I guess I'm okay with that. But I'd rather just have there be a firm policy, and that's what it was, and not, this arbitrary approval and disapproval.
Yeah, I mean, it opens them up to now they've got to do this with literally every app. And I mean, other people, I'm sure, who've had apps banned or didn't get into the store are now going to try to resubmit. Like, hey, how come that cartoon nudity is okay, but not this kind of cartoon nudity? And it's a whole bottle of worms or not bottle, a can of worms. It's a whole can of worms. I don't think they really need or want to get into, and I think they're really setting themselves up for trouble. Okay, so let's move on. That's all the time we have for news. We're really running short on time already. There's been so much good stuff to pack into the show. Now it is time for my favorite segment, maybe yours too, a little thing we call Planet of the Apps.
You maniacs! Damn you! God damn you all to hell!
Don't download it, Lon. You might not like how it runs.
Planet of the Apps intro. Always a favorite. I would like to respond. Rishi in the chat room points out they already do review every app. And I know that there is a review process and every app has to go through, but the way I had always thought they were doing it was, they have standards and they make sure that these apps meet these standards, and if they don't get in. And now it's like, well, there's standards, but there's also these kind of, uncertain, loosey-goosey, rules about if it's what kind of content, what the intent is, and all that. That's really what I'm saying. So obviously they already review every app, and that's why it takes a week or something to get into the App Store. So I just wanted to clarify. I don't want people to be confused. So let's move on. I know Matthew looked at an RSS reader. We're doing RSS reader apps for the Planet of the Apps segment this week. I think we looked at 3 of them. So Jacob looked at the Pulse Newsreader, Matthew looked at NewsRack, I looked at Reader. Matt, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about NewsRack. What did you think?
Okay, NewsRack, it's $4.99 in the App Store. It has a lot of different options to find feeds, and then it's got a really diverse set of settings. You can, add Twitter feeds. You can add your delicious bookmarks. It's got a big directory, and you can add different URLs, and I think that's those options are good. It's not quite as flashy as Reader or Pulse, but I'm not sure what makes for a good demo is necessarily the app that you want to use on a daily basis. I've tried the other 2, and I keep coming back to Newsreader just because when you actually go into reading an article, it shows which articles you've read and what you haven't read. And I know Pulse doesn't do that. I'm not sure about Reader yet. It's just a good reading experience. The sharing tools on it, you can do Twitter or Delicious or whatever. The library that it has missed a few of the feeds that you probably shouldn't miss, like the consumerist wasn't on there, and maybe a list of recommended feeds. I know that's something that Pulse has that NewsRack didn't have. So it'd be nice if they had a top 10 or top 20 list that you could just click on and add from there. So I liked it overall. I'd give it, say, 4 out of 5 iPads if we have a rating system.
We don't, but that's a good idea. We should start doing a rating system. So what about you, Jacob? Tell us a little. I'm trying to cut this short so we can get through the whole show here. What did you think? Tell us about your app.
I reviewed the Pulse app, which hit the news for being controversial and being taken down for New York Times. It sees itself as a different kind of reader, whereas Reader, along with NewsRack, and the unreviewed NetNewsWire, which I view as sort of an inferior version of NewsRack, at least right now.
We only wanted to work. We should clarify. We were only going to work in 3 because there's 3 of us. We each wanted to do 1, and we decided NetNewsWire was the one that we didn't quite make the cut.
I use it on my Mac, iPad, not so much. Whereas those are sort of encompassing. They sync really well with your Google Reader account. Mm-hmm. You have hundreds and hundreds of feeds. You have unread status, read status. All these. They views itself as a leisurely, no stress way to read news. It's extremely good for tumblers. I've added a bunch here. If there is any sort of media element, it pulls in a sort of a picture of that. So it's very, you browse through, you see exactly what you want to see. You click it, you touch it. Very easy to watch. That said, that there's downsides to that. It will pull in feeds. You can pull in feeds from your from your Google Reader account, but it just pulls them in. It doesn't do syncing with favorites or with starred,
right.
or it doesn't pull them all in. There's a 20 feed limit. Mm-hmm. It definitely felt to me as like if you were rich enough to have an iPad dedicated towards the coffee table, a perfect coffee table type reader. You want to pick it up for 10 minutes. You want to look at something pretty. You want to get to something immediately, but not an all-encompassing inbox of feeds and of news that you're interested in, like a reader or news rack would be.
Yeah. Interesting. So I took a look at Reader, and we could say R-E-E-D-E-R, I should say, if people want to look it up. So this is really, it's set up in a very interesting way. The UI is sort of different from a lot of the other ones that I was looking at. This is basically your home screen. These are all my different sort of categories. So here I've got buzz, trends, entertainment, news, blogs, health. This is all obviously pulled in from my Google Reader. And then let's say I want to look at news. I could click on it and just actually go to the news. And it'll, here's all my feeds, and then every article I pull up will go here. Or I can actually, like, pinch it or open it up, and this is all of the individual sources. So I could just take a look at, what's going on in the Washington Post today's highlights, and then I'm just looking at this one feed. It feels like overall with Reader, I think the thing that I would say I like the most about it, they're really focusing a lot on making use of the iPad controls. It really doesn't feel like a web interface at all like you'd traditionally be used to. Another good example, we could take a look here. So I've got this one article pulled up. I can actually just flick and go between articles. I can go over here and I can click, and they've also got little buttons here that I can use, but it's really built to use the iPad's full sort of touchscreen interaction. The one thing I would say about that's a slight downside, I mean, for the most part, I think it's really great. It's a little, it takes too much effort. You actually have to really, like, drag your finger. Oh, I did it too long. You have to drag your finger really along the whole screen. If you just give it a little flick, it doesn't actually... You can see it doesn't actually work. So that's a little thing. They'll probably fix it on the next version, but that's really one of the few downsides. The only other downside to my mind from this one is that it's very bland. Like, it works really well. It's extremely functional. But as you can see from looking at it, it's all gray. There's really no attempt to get any color. If every once in a while an icon will show up here, if it's like if I was looking at Wired, I know they're one of the ones that do it, you would actually see the Wired logo. But as you can see, almost none of my feeds have an icon. For the most part, it's just this very bland, gray, blank page. And then even when you go into the actual categories, it's still all gray unless the blog post itself had like a video in it or something. And it's just not, this is not one of the apps you would show somebody and be like, look at this, my iPad, it's so awesome. It looks like, technical documents or something. It's very dry to look at. Having said that, everything else about the functionality is actually pretty remarkable. I really like the way that it'll load up the actual post. It's really easy, one click, and then it loads up, and you're actually going on the blog. It's got a very full functioning browser. This is really great. It's really focused on how to export or communicate or share what you're reading. So I can delicious this, I can pin it, I can add it to Instapaper or read it later. If I want to, read it offline, I can save it. I can mail it, I can, send it to Safari. I mean, there's all kinds of different options for where to take it from here, which I thought was really nice as well. And it's just really snappy. That's the last thing I'd say. It's the fastest of. I've also tried Pulse, and I've also tried NewsRack, and I think this is probably the fastest out of all of them. That it really like snaps. Oh, there you go. You can see one of the icons. So this is what it looks like if somebody went to the trouble of putting an icon. Naturally, Tech. That's the section where all the sites have it. But if they haven't made an icon for it, you get these just blank white. It's really bland to look at. So that's some of the pluses and minuses. I have to say I've tried all three of the ones we're discussing. My pick would be Reader. What would be your pick if you tried all three?
I've tried all three and NetNewsWire. Really, Pulse is such a different app. Like, it can't replace my main. And for the main one, NewsRack. I go with NewsRack.
How about you, Matt? If you had to pick between all three of these, what would you pick?
Well, I do use NewsRack, and I'm a happy customer.
there you go. Two votes for Newsrack.
I had one complaint for Newsrack. There is a bug. I don't know exactly how they're articulated, but basically if you let your feeds go unread for too long, for a couple of days, or if you follow LAist like I do and they post 1,000 things a day,
yes,
it will pull in the 50 most recent, and then that's it. So it'll get a little out of sync. You'll get a little sort of unsyncness between maybe your Google Reader and it. But if you're checking about once a day, Newsrack's the way to go.
Yeah, I should mention, too, I didn't mention that this reader does sync very well with your Google Reader. So if I star a few things and then I hit the sync button, it actually will show up in Google Reader, which is a nice little feature. I have to say I don't really star things that much.
Yeah.
I usually read and consume, and if it's something I'm really interested in, I'll bookmark it for later, and that's about it in terms of my use of their functionality. So, but if you did star things, and then sync them, it would be pretty handy. I guess that's about all the time that we have. We're 3 minutes away from the hour. So, thanks everybody for being here. Thanks to Jacob Birch. Thanks to Matthew. Just a couple little quick things I want to mention. You can read Matthew's post. He's going to be posting on iPadweek.ly as well as on our This Week in iPad on thisweekin.com blog. So you can check out his post. I think we said Monday or Tuesday he'll do like a preview post of the upcoming show, and then Thursday he'll do the full rundown of everything we mentioned on the show. I should mention to you, Matt, Jason insisted to me before the show, he wants time codes. So when you're talking about, Lon mentioned this on the app, put like 12 minutes in there, and so that'll avoid me being yelled at, which I would really appreciate. We should talk about our next week on Planet of the Apps. We're going to do educational games. It was a special request. Somebody hit me up on Twitter and said, hey, I'd love to hear you guys talk about fun games for kids, educational games. So Jacob and I will be looking at some of those, although neither of us actually have kids, so we'll try to put ourselves in our most juvenile mindset possible.
We are both young at heart.
We're both young at heart, that's true. So we're big kids, as Jay Price says. So we should have an easy time with that. And there's so many new shows I want to tell you guys about that are coming to the This Weekend Network. We'd run out of time if I tried to talk about them all. We're having a video game show that's going to start in a couple weeks. We have a movie show that starts this Sunday, as I mentioned. We're going to do This Week in Cause, which is going to be for nonprofits and activism and corporate responsibility and all that kind of stuff. We're going to do a car show. We're doing a poker show that airs on Tuesdays now. So check it thisweekend.com. You can go to the schedule and check out all the shows that are coming up, and we announce them on the front page. There's a big orange bar where we talk about the exciting things that are coming up that we're into. So we're going to have 15 shows in like 2 weeks. We'll have 15 shows in the network, which is pretty amazing. And leave us nice comments and ratings on iTunes. That's my last note. Please. Nobody's left a comment about the show on iTunes since like April. It's a totally different show now. We've reinvented it from the ground up. So definitely, if you're out there, if you like it or if you hate it, that's valid. Go leave a comment, rate us, whatever you want. Just go and participate. We'd love to get more people noticing us on iTunes, obviously. Again, thanks to Scott. Check out his stuff on the site. Thanks to... I said thanks to Scott. I meant thanks to Matthew. Thanks to Scott Raymond from Gowalla for joining us. We really appreciate it. Thanks to Jacob for being with us as always. Absolutely. And we will see you next week on This Week in iPad.